Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil Kleinfeld, and I welcome everyone to today's scheduled meeting of the Town of Barnstable's Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee Capital Improvement Plan Report Subcommittee. Today is February 27th, 2024, and this meeting is being recorded by the Town of Barnstable. It would be broadcast on the Government Access Channel number 8 and available on the town's website after this meeting concludes. The agenda for this meeting has been previously posted on the town clerk's website page. With that, I'll just do the roll call, which won't be very long. Hector?
Yes, I'm here.
Jim?
Here.
Neil, and he is here. So with that, let me just preface, we sent out earlier today material that we'd like to go through, and I will screen share to lead us through that. Our goal is to start to discuss a very early draft of the CIP report to allow both the subcommittee members and the other attendees who are here today to exchange ideas and feedback so that we can improve upon the document even as we get next week the official town manager numbers and everything, and may have to do some updates for that. We've been working off of the material that Gareth has shared with us up till now. As you may have noticed if you opened up the PDF earlier, much as the town council has added new members and has already started to make some changes, the CIP subcommittee has new members this year and is also trying to bring some new ideas to the report we're doing, and we hope it makes it more useful to both the experienced town council members, the people who are new and may have not been through something like this before, especially something that is essentially $250 million in capital in 1 year. I don't think there's too many people who've gone through that in their careers on the town council or anywhere else, actually. So we're pioneering, and we need to have some feedback on whether this looks like it's the right way to go or not. So with that, any questions or comments, or shall we start to go through the document and review it?
Yeah, I would just add, Neil, you mentioned that the town manager hasn't made his final selections, and we're expecting that the final recommended CIP numbers on March 4th. I think we have some reason to believe that we're pretty close in terms of the quantum of the spending, but it's important for viewers to know that some of the trends that we've outlined won't change in any material way, but some of the numbers may change. For example, the first number on page 1, 244 million in total capital investments. That could be 245 or 243, whatever. But we're working with almost final numbers, but not final numbers. So I think it's important to emphasize that.
Good point. Jim, anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Okay, with that, I will share my screen. And hope that everyone can see that. Is that?
I can see it.
Is it? And the second question would be, is it readable?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so one of the changes that we thought made sense is to enhance the cover page to provide a one-page, 400-word summary of what people can expect in the report. We felt that even last year's was a 10-page, this is currently a 22-page report, and that's a lot to read. I was kind of always taught if you can't get it on one page, you're not condensing it properly. So that's what we tried to do for this year. And what we'll do in the report is expand on these bullet points, but at least people who have just been time pressed and only able to read the first page will basically know what we're trying to communicate. So on the left is, and reading this to you, although you can obviously read it yourselves, we think, an important thing to know about the proposed CIP is it is the largest in the town's history. It's triple anything that the town has done before, including both the CIP and the out-of-cycle approvals that Mark was kind enough to assemble for us so we could add them. But most of it is CWMP, as we know. CWMP, on the other hand, is showing for this 2025 a second double-digit in a row increase in price, and it's 25% up since last year, as Paula Schnepp was quick to mention when Mark did his presentation on February 1st. It's actually up almost 50% for the 4-year period of fiscal year 2025 to 2028. And for this CIP, all of the capital requested is recommended. Unlike that, general fund had its up, as we understand it preliminarily, its request trimmed by about 37% from $39 million that was recommended. And most of those reductions were in fixed asset repairs, building repairs, things of that nature. Most of the enterprise fund requests are recommended. The bulk of those that weren't recommended were related to Bismarck Park, but that is likely to be submitted later this year out of cycle. It wasn't considered to be ready to proceed quite yet.
Neil, I have a question on this out of cycle. Should that be even reported on for this CIP, seeing how it is in quotes out of cycle?
It's a good question. It's not recommended, at least from what we have so far.
I think it's my opinion, and maybe Mark has a viewpoint here, but my opinion is, it's that it's a material amount of the enterprise fund request. It's a $9 million amount. We're just noting that it may be submitted later out of cycle, which I understand to mean that the town manager will consider it and approve it or not at a later time. Is that, Mark, is that the way to conceive of that?
Yeah, we typically, just similar to community preservation supported projects, there's a process that we have to follow to submit those projects, requested funding to the Community Preservation Committee first, and if they approve to move forward with the project and recommend funding from CPC, then they go to the town council, and that typically happens out of cycle. As Neil mentioned, the Bismarck Park project isn't ready yet to be brought forward to the town council for their consideration. We're waiting to get more information on the actual scope of the project, and maybe Griffin shared that with the committee when he presented to you. So I think it's a difference between 2 million and 9 million, depending upon what project scope you go with, because one consultant says, that it's in one certain condition, another consultant says it needs another solution. So we're trying to rectify that, and then once we have that, if we feel like we're ready to go forward to the town council with that project, that will happen later this fiscal year. And so our form of government allows us to do that. We can bring forward capital projects at any time. And for those are a couple of examples of when we do bring them forward out of cycle. Another example would be when we receive a grant for a project, and we want to quickly take access of that grant, and it has a matching requirement. So we'll bring those out of cycle as well. So yeah, it's important to know, like we have highlighted in our report, in addition to projects being brought forward now for recommendation, we anticipate bringing forward this list at a later date.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Jim, in answer to your question, I think it's an FYI for the reader. I think it's worthwhile leaving in for that reason.
I have a comment.
Mhm.
On the left side, assuming I'm reading it as if I'm a new town counselor. And it says these are the CIP. And what I would recommend is that the CIP amount, and that would be 244 million. Then under CWMP, list the amount that is for this fiscal year, and then have your comments after that, and then the general fund, the amount for the general fund, and then you can say it's been trimmed by 37%, etc. And then the enterprise funds. But I would list the amount that the town manager, the totals that have been proposed by the town manager. So at a single glimpse, you would know the total, what CIP, CWMP is, what general fund is, and what enterprise fund is, and then make those comments under that.
Okay, well, we can certainly do that.
I think that it would clarify it, because all of your comments are very relevant. But if I were looking at it, I would like, okay, this is what the town manager is proposing. He's proposing $244 million. Okay, this is what CWMP is asking for, general fund, blah, blah, blah. And then have your comments, because
Consistent.
that way you will know at a glance how it breaks down. That's
Could
my
we-
comment. That's
yeah.
my comment.
I think that's a good point. Would it, rather than breaking it out, in the first sub-bullet, it talks about 170 million is CWMP.
Yeah, I would
Move that
drop that
down.
down. I would
Yeah,
drop
move
that
that
down
down.
to the CWMP.
Okay. I was thinking we could actually just list, how the 244 breaks out right there, which is 170, the amount of percentage, I think it's 21 of the general fund and 50 of
Well,
enterprise. I got it. We'll figure it out.
So
I
we'll
think it
figure
would
that
be
out.
clearer if you
Yeah.
had it under each of those categories.
Yeah.
Okay.
So under general fund, we do reference 39 million requests.
Right.
But what you're saying is, Lillian, we should give the amount, what the 63%
net.
represents.
Yep.
And so
Got
forth.
it.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah,
That's good.
Can do.
It's clear
Okay.
at first glance.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, so then going to the fifth bullet, I think the so what is that the loans that are going to have to be taken out will triple town debt. Town debt going up has always been anticipated, but the amount keeps rising with each higher CIP. And it's going to require some decisions that I think we need to surface that the town council should be thinking about in terms of how much to take from reserves and when, how much to take from the operating budget, if any, and then when to hold a referendum, since, as Mark pointed out on February 1st, no matter how many of the MEA or WIF or any other opportunities to raise revenues you find, they're all short of what's going to be needed based upon what we can see for 25 and 26. Actually, just moving down one beneath the line there, it talks about excluding the CPC projects from the 244. I handled those in this the same way as the Bismarck Park. If it's not recommended in the by the town at this stage, I discounted it and noted how much it was and told people where it's likely to show up again. Is that, yes, Mark? That's what the reason I was hoping to get you to weigh in.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. where it is, I think. I just wanted to make a point of clarification again about another comment that you made.
Yes.
The projects being requested in fiscal year 25 and 26 under the CWMP, we have identified the resources to pay the loans back that will be issued for those
Right.
projects. We have those, they exist. I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I thought you know, they
Yes.
don't need a debt exclusion override for those 2 years. It's starting with the projects in 2027 is when we run out of funding to do any more projects, but 25 and 26, we have identified the funding.
Okay, so that I need to clarify that. However, you're doing that by taking the money from the reserves to cover that, right?
Existing revenues and some reserves, yes. We
Yeah.
are dipping into the reserves, which will shrink over the course of the years as their commitments will exceed the resources. But should be enough there to cover the loans we issue for all those projects in 25 and 26.
Yeah, no, I got that. I think,
Okay.
but I understand what you're saying, and I'll try to fix that. I think okay, good. So,
And Neil,
yes.
I do have
Well-
one comment, Neil. You write in the fifth bullet, the fiscal 25 loans almost triple the town debt. That could be read as if our debt is going to triple in fiscal 2025. So we might want to make it clear that tripling of the debt is going to happen over a number of years.
Yeah, you probably need to clarify that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is clarified later on.
Well, maybe we need to just,
I think that's going to confuse people immensely, which is why I didn't put it up here. It's going to take a lot of explanation as to which Mark was kind enough to spend 15 minutes educating
Okay.
us on. But
Okay.
I think
We can come back to that, but that's just a comment.
Yeah,
Again, putting,
you really don't. Go ahead.
adopting Lillian's point of view. I'm a new town councilor. I'm looking at this. I might read that. So I might read that to say, oh, town debt is going to triple in 2025. And so we could tighten up that language. That's just a comment.
That's my point. You don't
Yeah.
want the town councilors to go berserk when they read that.
Right.
well,
But
I
in Neil's
get
defense,
I get the
Lillian,
point, but I think we have a chance of misleading them. What we're
Yeah.
talking about is the debt will triple. How we're going to account for it on the balance sheet is unique. It's not the way it would be done for anyone taking out a loan for their house. It's not the way it would be done in the private sector. It's unique pretty much to the way the Cape and Islands Water Fund works.
Mhm.
And so I think,
Why
so we
don't
work on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll-
I would say that those loans will increase the town debt. Just increase it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We'll fiddle with the words.
Yeah, the triple is really, it's a double take.
Yeah. The other thing, and Neil and Jim and I have talked about this, but we're trying to just put some bullets up just to give the highlights of what's in the report. We have on the right side our advice, and then believe it or not, 2 pages down, we have an executive summary. After having a report summary, we have an executive summary, which fleshes out a lot of the headline.
Right.
So we're not going to be able to make everything perfectly clear in this report summary. And we'll tell people that they ought to read on to get more information. So that would be my comment.
Good clarification. And with that, why don't we move to the right side? I think the 4 things that we would want the readers to know in terms of our advice is we think that the CWMP plan should be updated sooner than later. The cost, as we will show in detail later on, keeps going up every year, and much faster than inflation.
Well, we
but
really
also-
don't know that.
Pardon?
We don't have a handle on the inflation.
Yes, we do. The
No,
inflation rates, pardon? Inflation rates are published by the construction industry, and multiple sources say the highest they've been in the last 3 years is 10%. And they've averaged actually the last year 6%. So and we do show that in the data that is in the appendix for people who want to know.
okay.
We're not seeing 35% inflation in construction costs. Something else is happening. As Griffin told us, half of it is scope.
Right.
And frankly, we've asked them for clarification of that more than once, and we haven't received it. If we receive it, we'll adjust. But I think there's something else that merits the town taking a look at. Basically, how are we going to can we control the cost of CWMP? In addition to finding more money to pay for it, another source of managing this would be to see how we might be able to make trade-offs. And I think in the appendix, as is noted there in footnote 1, there's 10 different factors, including cost, including the inflation rates, including revenue sources that have changed a lot, not just since the project was approved, but also since after it was approved. So at least for this subcommittee, we kind of felt that not waiting 2 more years for the 5-year report to the Cape Commission, it makes sense to start looking at things now, and we'll expand upon that later in the report.
That makes sense to me.
Any other thoughts on that from anyone?
I'm wondering whether we can consolidate the first 2 items. You have your costs and you have your plan factors, because cost is a plan factor. So if you say that some of the planning factors have changed unfavorably, which would include costs and revenue drivers.
Mm-hmm. Can do that. The second one is we believe that we should recommend starting to plan for the Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion, which is not needed until 2027. As we kind of discussed yesterday, it's not clear, but a school debt exclusion to fund all the repairs requested could also occur at the same time. And the town has had not all of the votes for exclusions and overrides and such pass since 2000, which I don't think I don't know how many of the town councilors would know that. These are not sure bets. And so there's a lot to be considered. Mark?
Yeah, Neil, on that point, I just want to clarify that it's actually those votes took place before 2000. If you go back and look at the date the votes were taken, they really started in the early 1990s. So we're looking at a larger window than just since 2000. I don't know why that document that you have says the year 2000, but I would focus on the date of the vote, because that's when we went to the voters and asked for the exclusions.
Okay, I will go take a look. That came from the state. That's what the state is publishing.
Seen that before. That is state information, but I don't know what that column with the year 2000 really means, because vote for those projects took place way back in the 1990s.
So would it be best to delete that particular bullet? Because it doesn't mean anything.
I think it'd be best just to put in the right date instead of 1995 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it basically, the last 10 votes, 4 of them didn't pass.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of the town councilors understand how debt exclusion votes work. And what we prompt them to do is start to learn.
Yeah, certainly I think the returning town councilors have a good sense as to how that works. We actually had some presentations on that in a couple of years back, but it would be beneficial to do that again for our new counselors so that they understand those. And yeah, just looking back at this override schedule in your appendix 2, the ones for land were actually done back in 1985 and 1987. So those were the first debt exclusions we had, and that was for the land acquisitions out in West Barnstable, for the West Barnstable Conservation Area and the golf course. Those are all part of that debt exclusion override vote.
They passed though, didn't they?
They did. Those ones passed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll between your encyclopedic mind and the state data, we'll fix that to be accurate. But I think our point is understood. Unless people believe we should not recommend that the town council begin to think about planning for a debt exclusion.
Well, I, for one, as a subcommittee member, think it's crucial that we start to table the issue, and
Absolutely.
as Mark suggested, educate those that don't really know A, what the process is, and B, what the difficulty in getting them passed is. That's what people have to understand.
Neil, on many aspects that need to be considered, do you discuss that in detail later on in one of your?
Yes, in the we do later on, in terms of, we actually lay out about 5 or 6 different things that need to be considered. The one thing I don't know about is, and that would worry me as someone who's never done one of these, is how long would the town want to have a communications program to inform the public before the vote? And then the second issue, and you and I have actually talked about this, is when do you want to have the vote? Is it at another scheduled election, or is it a special election? From what I've read, the more voters to turn out, typically, the more likely an exclusion is likely to pass, which seemed counterintuitive. But
Not true. That would be the right way to do it.
So you'd want to target something like a national election?
No, not a national election. You'll get eclipsed by then. But a let's see, 26 or 28. You would want it in November because you have more offices that have to be filled at that time. I'm just putting on my political hat here.
Yeah, and it's a good point.
You're looking, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about a political decision that needs to be made. I don't know if this committee wants to make a recommendation on timing.
No, I don't think so. That's not our place.
But let me give you the as far as the timing for the budget development goes, the FY27 capital program will begin being developed in the fall of 2025. So we, as the town manager has stated, we're not going to bring forward a capital appropriation for the council's approval in the spring of 2026 if we haven't identified the funding source to pay back that loan. And so we would probably need some kind of action by the fall of 2025 as we begin develop the 2027 capital program. And that's what consistent with what we've said in the past, previous town council, as far as timing goes, the ideal timing, but there are other things that they will need to consider, like what is the fall 2025 election look like? Certainly, there's going to be a townwide election for town councilors on that agenda. That's one consideration. Other considerations may be you want to have it earlier than November because you have a lot more people here. The snowbirds will still be here, and you may want to give them the opportunity to vote on something as important as this. So, but that decision should probably reside with that body.
I agree with that. I'm wondering whether we should be more general than specific. For example, if we start the plans for Prop 2.5 debt exclusion and just have a bullet to fund CWMP, one bullet, and another bullet, the schools capital improvement for repairs, and just leave it at that.
I think that's an idea, but Lillian, I think the reader.
I throw that out. You guys are the committee.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at it and making it as simple as possible.
Right. Well, I think it's one thing to make it simple and another thing not to, and it's another thing to not point out to them that this is not something we just need to start thinking about in general. This is a matter of some urgency. So I think to put in a date is helpful, and it helps the reader say, oh wow, this is coming up.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to ask a question of Mark actually on that. It is because you've updated the town council, half of which is new, so they haven't been updated, or they have been updated, but there were no questions other than from one experienced town councilor. Is there a date that is the needed by 2027 misleading? It sounds like you need to do it in 2025.
No,
Exactly. Yeah, that was my point, is that, we probably wouldn't bring forward a request for funding a 2027 capital improvement project without identifying the funding source. And that would need to happen probably by the fall of 2025, especially if it's a debt exclusion override. It certainly would have to happen before we start the budget development process.
Okay.
I mean, we could always bring the alternatives to bring forward an appropriation without identifying the funding source and just not enter into a contract. And wait for, if they need more time, they could certainly do a debt exclusion vote at a later date. We just wouldn't proceed with any project planning until or contracting until that has been identified. But when we submit these projects to the SRF for funding, there are deadlines that we have to meet as far as contracting with a vendor to do the work, and so timing becomes critical.
Okay, that's very useful to know, and we will change that with the goal of trying to keep this as simple as possible, as clear as possible, but also hopefully as motivating as possible, so that the town council engages with Mark and others to start really getting into the details that they're going to have to be involved in overseeing.
Yeah, and Mark, I would just add something to what Neil said. So you gave that presentation on February 1st. And I think you had shared that with us, or we had gone over it at either a CIP or CFAC meeting, and you made some refinements to that 10-page slide deck based on our discussions. So I was, and Jim and I were in the room, and you pointed out to the town council that to two CFAC members were there. And I was ready for town council to respond to your page 10, where you said potential additional resources, and you went down the 5 topics. And as Neil said, there were no questions, except Paula asked a sidebar question. And so I realize these people are new and they're getting their bearings, but I think they need to. I personally was surprised that you didn't get more questions when you listed the additional resources, number 4 of which is reduced services.
Yeah, I think what's happening, Hector, is that they're on an information gathering, they're in an information gathering mode right now. And certainly I would expect that, once we get through this budget season, everything's going to pick up. The conversations will pick up on funding all of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Neil, I have an alternate for bullet 2. Why don't we just say plan for Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion now? And it basically parallels number 1, which is consider the CWMP update now. If you do now,
Okay.
Yeah,
immediate.
I think that's a good
I
suggestion.
think that's a good
Yeah,
that way you can.
it's a nice parallel construction, but it speaks to the immediacy of it.
Good.
And then that would allow you to take out some of those bullets.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Good feedback. Always easier to put something up and then react to it than to start from scratch. Third one. We're going to include in this the idea of making a minor addition to CIP process to basically do an explanation of changes year to year, which we prototyped in the appendix, to basically do 2 things. One is make sure that departments are reconciling to what they recommended the year before so that they can understand what they're changing. And the other is to actually give finance and the town a better understanding of what's going on. Way back in my career when I was in the controller's department, this was an extremely effective technique to keep people on track and cost control. So that's our recommendation. Pretty straightforward and something that Mark's group can decide on themselves pretty much. And the 4th is, and Jim was really the trigger for this. We'd recommend that the town council study a policy to lower the capital repair needs, as was discussed interestingly by a couple of the attendees, not us. All the fixed assets that the town has require repairs, be it repaving roads, be it replacing roofs, or as Dan Santos pointed out, for some of the houses that have been converted for town use, primarily for arts and culture, the cost to fix them is more than their assessed value, which I'm not sure why that ratio is important, but it is a good point. So a policy to guide asset acquisition and potentially divestiture or moving them to other organizations who can take care of the repairs, be they cultural organizations or community organizations, is something we'd recommend that the town think about and study as to how that would work. Do you want to talk to that more, James?
It just was a thought that came out of that session, which I really thoroughly enjoyed. But, there's just picking up on the conversations by people who are in the business and recognize that it's troubling that we have these assets, that it's costing us more to repair them and keep them in use than it is to, and then we're filling in the blanks by saying divest of them. So I just thought it was worth noting in the report that there might be areas in which we want to consider developing a policy where if the liabilities exceed the assets, then we should consider some other approach.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think the maintenance schedule is imperative. And a lot of the departments already do that, but they
Yeah.
just don't have enough funds to take care of it every year, as we found out.
Yeah, and it seems like I mean I guess there are several. So certainly the need for more capital is going up. It's a thing that needs to be looked at. I looked at the armory, which I think is for the fourth year, is not being approved for $3 million. That's complex. You'd say, well, do something with it, but there are actually restrictions, as I understand it. So I don't think we have the information to recommend how to deal with it. It's something, though, that is an opportunity to potentially to reduce repair costs over time. Does that make sense to
Sure.
you, Mark, or is this reaching too far?
No, that makes sense.
Okay. Are there things that we aren't recommending on this that people think we might want to consider?
My view is we've captured some of the headlines. I think if we continue to page through the executive summary, maybe more things will jump out. But I'd suggest that we go to page 3.
Okay. So the next page, moving along here, because I see we've used a good deal of time here. We included this year a table of contents, which just is a normal thing, and this is where we list the what's upcoming, the executive summary, which is going to expand on the summary we talked about, a quick snapshot of the town manager recommendations at a strategic level, not at a project by project level. Then, as in the past, sections on CWMP, the general fund, enterprise fund, and the 5-year plan. We've added a new one on debt and debt service, since obviously that's coming up as an area that is going to be changing, and we want people to start to understand better. And then we moved a lot of the data back into appendices, so people, not to pick on anyone, but I have a feeling people like Paula Schnepp are going to look for the data that they're looking for. And so if somebody wants it, it's going to be there. And we'll fix the one about the proposition votes for sure. But we wanted to include, for instance, and we talk about it in the I think it's the debt and debt services area, Mark's slide from page 10 from his February 1st. I mean, so I'm sure they may not have it right up on the top of their list, but it's very clearly put out in terms of you can't move ahead beyond 25, 26 without that debt exclusion. The last Appendix 5 is a list of the general fund projects that were recommended, the ones that are being referred to the Community Preservation Committee, and those that aren't recommended that kind of support the detail behind the 4th bullet about looking at a policy to deal with assets that are continuing to deteriorate. That one may not be necessary, and we'll be able to shorten it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's certainly comprehensive. You
Yeah,
guys
well,
really did a great job.
It's a paradox, but we think that I'm hoping personally that with putting the summary up front on one page and then providing more detail as you go deeper into this, as we'll see in the executive summary, but then that doesn't convey everything. We've got a complete report, no matter who the audience is, at the town council, the town manager, the public, And I expect that this may also get read by a lot of the department managers. I'm not sure everyone's going to go through all 350 pages of what have historically been the town manager's report. Although that is a bound report, correct, Mark?
Yes.
How does this actually get to people? And for the public, they can download it as a PDF.
Well, we put all of CFAX reports on our website under your section of the website. So the public could access it there. They can get the PDF document, download it.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm actually interested in how is this delivered? I'm guessing this is delivered to the town council members and to the town manager, not as a printed document, but as a PDF that they can print out. But the first thing they see is a PDF from Cynthia Lovell, right?
Yes, that's what we do. We forward it to the town council administrator and she'll provide it to all counselors.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and Mark, this is what I left you a voicemail about. So
Yes.
she provides it to the town councilors in a printed form or electronic form?
I think she does it electronically. She will probably email them the PDF document.
Right. But do you think, okay, so so for the meeting, when the CIP is discussed, the first town council meeting, whether it's April 8th or April 20th, April 22nd, will they have, do they get a pile of printed materials from Cynthia Lovell, do they not?
Yes, they get, the printed agenda, any other
Right.
documents. They can certainly request Cynthia to print out any CFAC report.
Yeah,
If they request it, they may print it out themselves when she emails
Right.
the PDF document to them.
right. So
Um,
they'll get it the prior week, a week in advance of the meeting.
Oh, we'll send it to them right after you submit it.
Right.
You finalize it. I don't remember what the date
April
is.
8th.
April
is
8th.
what-
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So at that point, when we receive it from you, we'll forward it to Cynthia immediately and she will send it to them. Yeah. If you get it done earlier than April 8th too,
Yeah.
that could give them
Yeah.
more time.
But the question, the question, Mark,
Uh-oh.
is.
Don't open up that box.
Mark, the question is, when will the town council first, which meeting in which the town council will address CIP matters? Do you happen to know what date that is?
Yeah, I think that, hang on a second. I think that's the first meeting in April. Let me just confirm that.
Because I think where Neil's headed with the question is, we want to make sure that they have a chance to read this rather than just glance at it on a screen. My thought would be to ask Cynthia to give them printed copies of this CIP report.
April 25th is
Okay.
the date of the first public hearings for the capital improvement program.
Okay.
Yeah, so that it'll be interesting. I think what we have to do is attack it from what are all the likely levels, ways people will consume this. I think a
Right.
lot of people are just going to consume it on their PC.
Correct.
Right.
And I think that the first thing they're going to see is that first page. And that's that not everyone will go beyond that. I mean,
Right.
That's the whole purpose of
I
that
don't
first
think
page.
so. I think the council will read the entire report.
Right.
I just want to let you know that Mark and I have talked about it, and the CIP subcommittee, he will arrange for the CIP subcommittee to meet with the town manager to discuss your report.
Right.
And the chair of the subcommittee will be the spokesperson for the open meeting. So
So the timing for the meeting with Els Lillian would be
after you, yes, as soon
in the
as
wake
we
of the
have-
April 8th delivery. Yeah.
Yes, as soon as we
Okay.
have approved it from our own committee.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
Yeah. I think you
Excellent.
will find it a very, very beneficial meeting.
Yeah,
It's a really honest give and take, and anyway, we're trying to reestablish that.
okay, good.
Excellent.
All right, Neil, should we move to the executive summary?
Yeah,
I appreciate that. So the executive summary, which is still under construction,
Right,
expands upon
right.
the 400 words, which I think is going to get reduced a little bit on that first cover page. And this is basically tries to put some meat around the bullet points. So we're going to repeat some of the things: largest CIP amount in town history, and thanks to all the data that Mark gathered for us, I think it's hard to miss the difference over on the upper right-hand corner column chart. So I think that's pretty easy to digest. I'll work on the triples town debt, where the more important thing really that we're trying to get to is what it does to the debt service. And Mark, what I did here is I used your February 1st data and I took out the project management. So those numbers don't look the same as you presented, because I don't think those add to the debt. They're just expenses, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And that's, and that's just for the 25-26. That it gets another $10 million when you start the 27, 28, 29 debt service, if we were to stick to the CIP. I did not include that, and it's almost a question, do people think we should? Because which would require, Mark and his people to kind of extend their numbers, because I don't want to make them up.
Which party do you want to?
Well, I think to me, what we want to communicate is, and get people to understand is the debt service and the repayment that we need to worry about more than it is actually the total debt level. Because this is what has to be covered with the added revenues, all the taxes that have been put in place for years now. But that's we're adding $10 million in debt service that has to be paid between 25 and 29.
so
Why
Neil,
why don't you rework that? Why don't you rework that first paragraph under the
Yes.
CIP triple and get rid of some of the, you don't need to know about the debt. If you're really going to talk about the debt service, then just highlight that part.
Yeah,
Because
And I would change-
if that's critical.
and I would change the headline to debt service quadruples.
Got it.
Yeah,
I thought about that.
yeah,
It's just one
That's-
leads to the other.
Yeah.
But it gets me out of this issue that you all pointed out earlier about it doesn't really triple the way it's accounted for on the balance sheet,
Right.
which I'm still learning. Okay.
Neil,
Yes.
in the second paragraph under this heading, it begins with how the town will source the revenue to pay. You
Yep.
may want to rework that. That goes to my comment earlier.
Yes, I caught that.
Identified. Okay, good.
Yeah, and I'll make it clear that 25-26 is fully paid for out of taxes and reserves. The problem becomes 27, which needs to be addressed within with the year 2025, which is I think I understand. It may be, I'll work it, and I'm sure it'll get refined again after when we get to the real first draft.
Yeah.
But we'll get closer. Then we wanted to add some flesh to the bones in terms of the advice. So we'd have the same 4 pieces of advice, but we're trying to explain why they're there. When we talk about considering the CWMP plan update now, there is one coming up that has to be done for the Cape Cod Commission, which I think was the original agreement to do one or request to do one every 5 years. I don't know if the town agreed to that or not, but I think it did. But I think that there's so much has changed. It would, the town would be well advised to look at all the aspects that have changed, including the cost, but also things like revenue and things that are in Appendix 1. And actually, even the sewer connects are going to be down by the end of Phase 1. Not a lot. I think it's like a 13%. But it's time to probably look at that, is the thought. And what we're talking about is on page 3, some key questions which we could add to. I think what the idea was to try to give the town council, well, what are we trying to, what we're doing the update for? And I think the first thing is, what have we learned in the first 3 years on the ground with Phase 1? And what are the implications? It's not just all cost. They've learned a lot about the technology, about all the other aspects. And then I think the thing that we really want to push is what do we know about options, or can we find out to make this potentially more affordable? The technologies currently being proposed, as Griffin said, for things like wastewater treatment in 2027 is, as he said, the most expensive possible technology that they could find. Not because it was expensive, but because it does everything. Do we really need that? With today's, unless that's going to solve what Betty brought up as an issue, which is effluent disposal, because we're going to put that back into the drinking water system and solve the effluent problem, I think are things that it would merit looking at. And you can read the rest faster than I can read them to you. And I think the idea is to, there may be things that people could suggest we add to this list of questions that the town council may consider, gee, we do want to know these answers.
I have a question, and this may be for Mark. So the middle column, revenues down, where we've couched it in actual dollars, whereas in the left side it's millions of dollars. Can we come up with what the revenues from the original plan at $18,000 per parcel would have been, and what they're going to be now at $10,000 per parcel?
Yeah, it's just a matter of looking at what the projections are for the updated connections.
Yeah.
And what time period are you looking to do that for?
Well, I'd like to try to
30 years? The next 5 years?
Well, on the left column, we have CWMP costs up by year.
And
Capital
and Hector, just to clarify, and that's
Yeah,
just for fiscal year 25.
Right,
So that's just a single year.
yeah.
Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So maybe it's not, maybe I would withdraw the suggestion.
Yeah, it is apples and oranges, and I don't believe in the original proposal that I read, I could find anywhere what they did not project out how that was going to translate into revenue in terms of the $18,000. And I don't think they talked about what Mark talked about. I think, I forget when exactly in the last few weeks. The reality is that some unknown percentage, but probably most people are going to amortize that as a betterment and not pay $10,000 or $18,000 for 20 years or until they sell their house.
Yeah, that's true. It's a very difficult number to project on an annual basis because of the option to amortize the assessment for up to 30 years. It's going to be all over the place. Some people will pay the entire sewer assessment up front when it's assessed. Other people will amortize it over a 30-year period. As property transactions take place, anybody with an outstanding payments will get resolved at the time of the property transfer. Oftentimes people come in and pay them off early. Those who elect to amortize it come in after, say, 5 years and pay off the remaining balance. It's all over the place. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
Okay,
Yeah.
I withdraw the suggestion. I think
Okay.
it's good the way it is.
Okay.
Okay, I've got some comments
Yep.
on this executive summary, which is excellent. I think that each of the points is wonderful, but the most valuable part are the key questions. So I'm wondering if you could tighten up the narrative, the beginning narrative. For example, number 2, which is right on our screen now.
Yeah.
You talk about Mark's presentation and all that. And the second paragraph begins with CFAC believes it's time for the town to start developing a plan. Well, that's already in the heading. So we don't really need to do that. In
Yep.
other words, if you could tighten it up just a little bit and get rid of some of the redundancy, because I think the valuable part are the questions. You know, these are the questions that the town council needs to begin grappling with. Anyway, that's my comment.
I will
Okay.
say that I think that the redundancy, or at least the repetition, is important. It's a thematic repetition, that the idea of it's time to start to develop a plan. How many times you can say that? Is once enough? Probably not. But I'm not opposed to having multiple locations, the concept that it's time to start the planning process.
Okay, what I would do with the heading on number 2, I would start with that second paragraph first. CFAC believes it's time for the town to start to develop a plan, and then drop it, and then talk about the other thing. But you can, you know.
Yep. I get the idea.
That emphasizes our point of view.
Yeah, and we'll put now in the as we in there. But I get the idea. Tightening it up, but making sure we reinforce the message is what we need to strive for.
Yeah.
Along with Lillian's thought, though, that second sentence, we launch into the school budget, that may be a little bit out of place.
Yeah.
Because the focus is on CWMP. It may be a little bit out of place, and I was also going to question.
Well, you could have 2 paragraphs, one for CWMP and one for schools if you choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as because we have that in the summary, the first page. Yeah,
and I guess I have a question, you know, the school thing would personally worry me, and Mark spoke to this yesterday, in terms of it's an unknown. But I think we should bring it up as something that the town council should be aware of, because we don't really go into a lot of detail in terms of any of the department budgets or requests. But school is obviously unique this year, or coming up. But let me work on that, unless we want to take school out. And I wouldn't ballot for that, but I'll ask the question. Do we want to keep it in?
I'd leave school in, but just
Yep.
differentiate schools from CWMP.
I think that number is 80 million and not 55, so 25 to 29 should be 80 million.
Yes, it is, but it's about 80 million, 75 actually, and I just included because since the 9.9 has been approved or is recommended, I just included the numbers for 2026 through 28.
Not 29, you didn't include 29?
Yeah, I just noticed that myself. I'll go look. Thank you. Okay, so
70, if that's the case, it should be 71 million.
Yep. Okay, I'll work on that. And then whoops, excuse me. As with number one, I tried to lay out some of the key issues. And this was a question earlier. And I could use help with these questions, but to me, I noticed that Orleans actually split their sewer projects out and did separate exclusions for several of them.
I'll tell you, I found that interesting as a point of information, but I would not I don't like having Orleans referenced in the executive.
Yeah, I think let's not bring in too many extraneous information, even though it's nice and everybody loves it. The simpler you can make it, the better.
Not everybody loves it. I got it. I'll get rid of that. So the question is, is it single? And one of my questions would be, let's say we do a debt exclusion for the 2027 borrowings. Is that the only one you think we'll ever have to do, Mark? Or there's a lot more money even for phase one after that. Are we facing more than one debt exclusion?
Unless we find more sources other than property taxes, we will be coming back for more debt exclusions to continue the implementation of this program as it currently stands.
That's what I thought.
Phase one.
Phase one. Yep.
Phase one, yeah. And so that's why you get to the issue is how much do you want to ask for? Is a trade-off? Do you want to ask for all you need forever? No, probably not.
No. But certainly, we would probably want to do it to avoid voter fatigue, not go before the voters every single year for that fiscal year's projects, but put together a comprehensive list of what we anticipate doing, for example, maybe the next 3 or 4 years, and asking them to exclude the debt service for those projects, and then they get a break for a few years before, and we can reassess at that point in time. Maybe more federal and state aid is materialized, or alternative technologies have been developed, and so we got to take it in smaller chunks. It's an adaptive plan. It's constantly changing. Scope is changing, as you mentioned earlier tonight, and so we'll bite it off in smaller pieces, I think.
Okay, so to the I'm looking at the clock here and don't want to keep everybody all night, but if people have other ideas or additional ideas for other questions that should be here that could help the people reading this think about, oh, gee, these are things that we need to get some experts to help us with, that would be useful, because I was worried mostly about how long is it going to take to communicate this to get those people who care about this stuff to come out and vote. Not to be an advocate or anything, because I know we're supposed to be neutral, but
well, it's a decision that the town council has to make, and the town councilors are the ones who are going to have to sell this. We can make these recommendations, but ultimately we can't go out there and sell it.
Right. Now, I guess the thing that the perplexing thing to me is, other than Mark, is anyone on the town council or working with the town council done one of these before?
Done one of what?
No, because this is the old timers have rotated off.
Right.
When was the last debt exclusion, Lillian? Do you remember?
In high school, the regional tech center.
Regional tech, and
what year was that?
2019.
It's in the appendix.
Yeah, and Jed Cullum and Rep Grassetti are off. They were the only ones who were there.
Yeah. So I think I've tried to go to school and learn as much as I can, but I'm sure that the town council is going to have to get more smart about this than I am right now. So it's going to take some time. Has Mark Ells been through one of these, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah, he has. Okay, he's been around for a while too, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so,
what will end up happening is our legal staff probably will begin with a presentation on the do's and don'ts of how to conduct a
yeah, I
ballot.
saw that once, yeah.
And we would have to do that again for the new council. So they would understand what staff can do. Elected officials have a lot of leeway. They can actually go out and campaign for or against a ballot, but they can't use town resources in the process of doing that. But staff is very restricted. We can only act in an information capacity, providing information. And we
Yeah,
have to be careful about presenting a presence of, or the perception of advocacy.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay,
Just before we go on, Mark's comment before I actually just wrote down, I think it would be helpful to have a statement, something like what Mark said a few minutes ago in here, that based on the current schedule of spending for CWMP, we will need more than one debt exclusion unless new resources are identified, or exactly how you said that, Mark. But I thought that was a very pointed statement that I think town council should hear.
For phase one.
For phase one,
But
exactly.
we need to add that it's only for phase one.
Right.
yeah, it's not a long way off. Good point.
No.
Okay.
This is really helpful. Okay, we're almost there. The idea of making, as we, as you told us, Mark, to bring back later for this report, I think the idea that we're seeing some significant changes year to year between CIPs. I mean, 2027, is at 118% more than it used to be. For the 4-year period where you can match year to year, we're up 39%. And if you look underneath that, as in the it actually is in the body. Just looking at the individual departments, the average department changed 46% plus or minus last year. I think they can do better than that. We were just, or the town was just very, very lucky that all the pluses and minuses basically canceled out for 2025. But, you get underneath it and everything changed. DPW went way down, but CWMP went way up. And I think, when I was in finance 40 years ago, I think that would have been, a problem. But I think that an explanation of change analysis can help the departments do a lot better consistency. Does that make sense?
Yes, there's 3 major components to that, and that I'm Neil, and one of them is scope change. Second one is inflationary costs, inflationary factor, and the third one is the movement of projects from year to year.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 main components of why these numbers fluctuate.
So can DPW write down in a coherent way what you've just said, each of those 3 sources of change?
Sit down and do that analysis. Yeah, I mean, we would certainly probably direct it to DPW because they're the proponents of most of the projects that are included in here. And I think, for example, today, I think I'd have to confirm this with them, but the dollar amounts that you see listed in the outer years are stated in today's dollars. I don't think they're including anything for an inflationary factor. So then another year goes by and they go through their CIP projects that are still hanging out there, and they update the dollar amounts based on current cost estimates. And so, that's part of it. That's why you see that the project submission numbers change from year to year for the projects that don't get funded this year. that come back in subsequent years, and the number's usually a little bit higher. And that's a matter of updating it for inflation, and potentially there could be a scope change in there as well.
Yeah, and they were very helpful in trying to explain many of them in terms of so in the water supply, the scope of the straightway was that they had really planned in the future to do a second plant and then decided to do it all in one. But Mary Dunn, they actually did include for which was there before, they did include the inflation year to year. And some others, as you say, they probably didn't. But I think that getting an explanation would certainly help CFAC, if no one else, because it wasn't at all clear that the reason CWMP didn't go up even further this year or in this CIP was because they moved two big projects, each worth about $15 million, out of the time frame.
Yeah, I almost had a heart attack when I saw that.
Yeah.
Because I had a funding schedule all mapped out, and it was working. And then when I saw that, I had to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, so that's why we're recommending that. And then we explained the fourth one, and we just tried to add some more words to that. I don't think I need to. I know we need to tighten things and make them clear.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's the end of the executive summary, pretty much, with the normal thanks to Mark and all the other people who made this possible. Then we go into each of the different areas, like the town, and I won't go through this, but just wanted to. So each of the things that we showed you in the table of contents then gets its own, as in the past, area of analysis. This being one that wasn't necessarily there, which was the town manager's recommendations. And we did ask, or we did add in the middle of this page, I took it on myself to allocate the different projects by their use versus department. And maybe at some point in time, somebody can kind of check my math. It's pretty straightforward. But I was kind of surprised at, if you replaced CWMP for wastewater, that is the same. But drinking water, and then where water recreation, that stuff, ends up being, that's 80% of CIP.
Yep.
And I think, if the town council really gets through and has the time to read all this, this might help some of them at least try to understand the scope of where all this money goes. Because it's not that when we put it into DPW, it kind of, I have a feeling people might think that that's all roads, and it's not. Most of it's buildings.
But isn't this 70%? That's consistent with our town's strategy, right? And mission, water quality.
Water is our number one resource. I mean, our top priority, the quality water. That's our livelihood.
It sure is.
Yep.
And I actually sent a note to our my town councilor saying that I thought the focus on water that the town council is really great, because we did mention that in CFAC's budget report last year, by the way, as if that was a big discovery for somebody. So that's what we've got. I think this has been really useful. I presume people would like to get to dinner and such. Any other thoughts?
Yes, Neil, I think you guys have done a wonderful job. But based on the fact that it's 22 pages, I think that the CFAC consideration and editing and review really needs to have a lot of time. I'm not sure that we could do it in one sitting. That's my comment.
Well, given that we just spent an hour and a quarter doing 5 pages with only 5 people, I think you have evidence to show that.
Yeah.
How do we do that then? Do we do it by section? Do we, one way to do, I don't know a good way to do it. I've been trying to think about how
I
to
think
do
you're
it.
gonna have to break up the review to the rest of the committee and give them sections. There's no way we would be able to
Mm.
get
I think
anything
that's, I
done.
think that's true.
Assign a member a specific section or page or whatever.
Yeah,
But to do what we're doing now through 22 pages, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
I mean, the only problem with that is, they haven't been part of the conversations that
Correct.
you all have been, and they may not have a clear understanding of what is in, they could certainly do editing.
I think yeah, I'm sorry.
For grammatical and things like that, but, as far as the content numbers and things like that, they're just not gonna know. Because they haven't had the benefit of the discussions you all have.
yeah, I think that's a good point. I
We're
would
ready.
also like to recommend that we guide the entire committee to focus less on wordsmithing and punctuation and more on the substance, more on the substantive recommendations that the subcommittee is asking the full committee to endorse or not. In other words, have a review that's a higher level review. And Lillian, I don't know if this is possible, but I recall last year's CIP and all the back and forth. It was painful, and I'd like to think that we can review this paper with a full committee and ask that they really focus on the substance rather than the
Yeah,
wording.
we have traditionally done that, Hector. We've had one session to deal with the substance and the content. And then the final one would be just for wordsmithing.
Right.
But because this is such a long and detailed report, I like the idea that we would divide it up in sections. So if we could have at least 2 meetings to talk about the substance and 1 meeting just to have everybody wordsmith, I think that would be fine. Can it be done? I mean, you guys are doing the work, so.
Well,
Yeah, I would
another way,
just go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was wondering if, and never mind. Mark's point about, hearing what was the logic to this stuff and everything is, just reading it is not gonna, I was thinking if people just took the time and wrote down their comments, but they're probably not enough information just reading the document to do that.
Well, this kind of group discussion is very, very helpful.
Yes.
And for the other members of the committee who are not here, I think it would be beneficial for them to hear this kind of discussion. The rationale behind particular figures and positions. So
we need to work on finding dates.
yes. Now you
Okay.
have another CIP committee subcommittee meeting coming up, what, next week?
6th. Yeah, but that one.
Is that your final one?
No, well, not exactly. The purpose of the 6th is because we will have finally got the final town manager recommendations.
Right. We
have a day to go through it, and then we are meeting okay, what did we just learn? What do we have to change? It's turning the thing around so that we can get it out the next week, so that people can start to review it. And given Jim's schedule, it doesn't look like we can have all the CIP members there on the 11th to do that review. If you want to have all the CIP committee members there.
Yeah, Jim's not going to be here on the 11th.
Well,
You don't have internet on your plane?
So there'll be 2 out of 3. I think
Yeah,
I
I
think
can
we
see
can
that
do it.
now.
I think we will be
I'll end up
fine.
being a viral video somewhere.
I think we can get the benefit of
Let's-
Jim's comments after, you know, focus, if we focus Jim's attention on the meeting on the 6th, you know, we'll have had the numbers. Jim, we can get your input then, and
Yep.
then, you know, any other comments you want to make by email in the subsequent days. I think we can proceed with the
Yeah.
March 11th full committee meeting without Jim there. I
All
think
right. So when will, okay, if we will do that on the 11th, can you email it to the committee before then? I mean, you got this, if you do the final analysis of consolidating and correcting any figures that you get from the town manager on the 4th, can you get it out by the 8th?
I think so, Neil.
If you can get it to us by the 8th, we can begin the discussion on the 11th, and then we've got another special meeting on the 15th.
Right.
So I think that should do it.
Yeah, I think so too. Lillian, I would just, you know, push back a little bit on having, I think you said 2 sessions on substance and 1 session on wordsmithing. I'd like to dispense with the wordsmithing.
I'll second that.
Just focus people on the substance. You
Yes,
know,
but,
the words and the you know, the punctuation and all, you know, not everybody's gonna agree on everything. I would just urge people to, you know, to hold fire on, you know, some of their light editing changes. Just focus on the substance, because that's the
Actually-
important thing,
Well,
Yeah.
we have another meeting on the 25th.
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I would go for approval on the 25th, if we could. If we're gonna have meetings on the 11th and the 15th,
yeah,
we've already had the town managers information and figured out how to turn that around, I presume.
right.
The only thing that I think I would like to see is for Mark's group to have had enough time to look at the numbers we have in there and make sure that they feel comfortable with them, because I don't know,
So
we don't have a good
so
way of checking all the numbers ourselves, to be honest.
Yeah. So can Mark, can you and Gareth do that the week of March 11th? Between the 11th and the 15th, when we have the 2 meetings?
Yes, we will certainly try. And for that meeting on the 15th, will that be in person so we can have some pizza? And perhaps that's a Friday night.
Ooh, awesome.
Oh,
Are
you're
you-
gonna come back for that, Jim, huh?
Are you back by then, Jim?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He wouldn't miss it.
Especially if Mark's buying, I'll be there.
Well, there you go.
Oh, the other,
Well, I
point I
don't-
want to make, did you guys check your emails? We just finalized this evening, as I was in this meeting working with Gareth, the entire CIP document. And it's going to the
Oh.
printers tomorrow. It's a 28 megabyte file.
Oh, my
Emailed
God.
it all to you during the meeting. I just want to see if it went through. Because of the size of the file, it might get blocked.
I think
Okay.
that will get blocked. I don't have it.
I don't
Yeah, I
have
don't
it.
have it either.
Okay.
I think we should use Lillian's approach of making it into sections, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Usually if we can get below 10 megabytes, it'll usually go through, is my experience.
So why don't we-
Or
Yeah,
if
What I'll do is work with our IT department to set up an external link
Yeah.
where you can access the document via that link, okay?
Yeah.
that's a good way to do
download
it.
is
Yep.
great.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
And then-
why don't we plan on your summary and your executive? So that would be the first 5 pages on the 11th, because that's the crux of the report.
Right. Could I, does it make sense to leave the cover and the executive summary until after we focus on the individual sections? Because any changes to the individual sections would flow naturally to the summary pages. Just a thought. But I agree, Lillian, that we should, when we distribute it for the meeting on the 11th, we should tell the committee members that they should focus their review on the following pages or sections. And the question is, which sections?
Yeah, I would go, if it's 22 pages and we're going to do 2 sessions,
Yeah,
I would, but 5 of the pages in this are appendix, which
Right.
are interesting, but not, a lot of stuff to recraft, I don't think, for the group.
So
I
you've
try
got
to break the remaining 17 pages into like 8 and 8 or something.
Well, you got a summary of the town manager's proposals, which
Right.
they,
Yep.
which the members will get a copy of it anyway. So you don't have to really talk about that. But you've got the CWMP, you've got the general fund, and you've got the enterprise.
Maybe
Actually,
we make-
but those actually don't have much new. I think the town
Okay.
manager, I don't think, if you look at this page, the pie chart, you can't see it actually. The pie chart on page 6 on the thing, I don't think, or the question would be, does the town manager's report show how the monies are sourced in a way that someone who's not familiar with spreadsheets would understand?
Yeah, so there's, under the town manager's recommendation section, it lists all the projects that are being brought forward for recommendation, and column headings indicate what that funding source for that
Right.
project is.
Right.
If you're a spreadsheet freak like me, that's fantastic. My feeling, and what I did in the report here, is I distill that down to basically, where do we get $244 million, and 91% of it is from loans. I think that's what most people are going to react to. I don't think most people know the difference between CTP reserves and CWMP reserves and all that. That's
Yeah.
important to the finance, obviously, but how many people relate to that?
For our review process, do you think that it matters to our members, our committee members?
I don't think they understand it either, frankly. I don't.
Well, they have the book.
That's just my honest opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I actually read it. So, but I've been around a long time.
Yeah.
So,
Can I suggest that, Lillian, how we divide the guidance that we give to the full committee as to how we want them to review this document starting on the 11th? Why don't you let Jim and Neil and I sort of work this document a little bit more, and then we'll come up with a suggested way to parse the focus for the 11th and for the 15th.
good. We
if that-
defer to your suggestion.
Yeah.
I
So
think
we'll-
that'll be best.
Yeah.
The part that you think that our members would find most interesting and understand it and have a good discussion about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
then
And
I'll leave it to
then
you
we
guys.
just figure out,
Yeah,
what
you
kind
figure
of
it out.
beer Marcus is going to bring on the 15th.
Well, who's bringing the hors d'oeuvres?
Yeah.
Chips.
Anyway, that's I think that's a
Okay,
good way
that
to
sounds
proceed.
good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone. Anything else before we
Thank-
adjourn?
Thank you. I
Anyone?
just want to let you know this because Chuck is chairing our OB committee. And so I said, he's listed everything that we've always done. And so I said to him, here is the first draft of the CIP subcommittee report. And his response was, oh my goodness, my eyes are twirling around. And I said, I've always said this about Neil. You point him in a direction and then just get out of the way.
We'll charge Chuck royalties if he wants to use Neil's template for the operating committee.
That's right. That's right.
The operating budget report.
Yeah.
all right,
But thank you all.
Yeah. So I move that we adjourn.
Second,
Second.
I think doing a roll call, Hector,
Yes.
Jim,
yes.
Neil says yes too. Mark,
Okay.
thank you very much